people, my name's Nicole, and today I have my May wrap-up. I also have a Helen.
Hi.
Helen of Where Now. She doesn't upload very often,
No.
but she's a wonderful human being. She's a cosplayer. You guys should go check out her cosplay pages, No Fox Cosplay, on Facebook and
No
Instagram.
Fox Given.
No Fox Given.
It's a pun.
It is a pun. No Fox Given Cosplay on Instagram and Facebook. She's wonderful. At some point this month we're actually planning on doing like a Andrew and Neil thing. It's gonna be awesome. You just shook all my bookshelves.
I'm so sorry.
Anyway, it is past the end of May. We're like a week into June now. But I thought it was about damn time that I finally got around to doing my May wrap up. So the first book I read this month was The Dark Prophecy by Rick Riordan. This is the second book in the Trials of Apollo series. You should read that.
I know.
It's really good. And I really loved this book. It has a lot of Leo and Calypso, which was sort of teased at the end of the previous book in the series, and now we're just like hanging out with Apollo and Leo and Calypso, and it's awesome. And they're just like flying around America trying to find a new prophecy. We get introduced to some awesome new characters. We learn a lot more about like the Hunters of Artemis, which is really cool to learn about. Rick finally answers the question of well, we know the Hunters of Artemis can't date guys. Can the Hunters of Artemis date girls? And the question's finally answered, and it was great. There's a lot of really good like familial stuff, and just in general I think seeing Leo and Calypso as a couple. We sort of vaguely saw them in Blood of Olympus, but we didn't see them in too much detail like how they interact as a couple, because really the only time we saw them together was when they first met. And now we're actually seeing them interact as a couple, and it's so much fun, and I love everything Rick Riordan writes, and he's so much fun. He's so funny. Apollo is a really funny character, so I gave this 5 out of 5 stars. And then I read A Court of Wings and Ruin by Sarah J. Maas, and this was so good. I was absolutely torn to shreds emotionally after the previous book, and this one picked up a couple months later, and it just was so good. I was going to do a full video review, but like the footage was all out of focus and awful, and I was too lazy to reshoot it. But I did write a pretty in-depth Goodreads review, which I will link along with all the others in the doobly-doo. But it pretty much just like tore my heart out and put it back together, and there was a number of characters were introduced as queer. A couple of new characters came in who were gay and bisexual, and a major character came out as bi, and it was so good, and it makes me so happy. And also awesome relationship development. Obviously, I mean, Farah and Reese are just adorable together, and I love them. But also seeing the developments with Elaine and Lucian and Nesta and Cassian, it's just so good, and I love them so much. I love this entire like group of friends that Reese has. They make me so happy. I feel like it ended in a really good place where like I'm definitely interested in reading more. It feels kind of like the ending to City of Glass. So like it feels like it could be an ending to a series if you wanted it to be, but it still leaves sort of room open for more, which I do believe she is writing more.
Wait, how many stars?
So I gave it 5 stars. Then I read SpiderGwen volumes 0 and 1. The first one sort of catches you up on what happened previously and sort of gets the story established, and then the first one goes more into depth. I don't really know why they do that sometimes, but it's weird. I mean, with some of the stories, I get it. It's like goes back and shows like the previous comics what you've missed, but these don't.
Well, it's like maybe if like you want to like engage the audience, and then they're like, wait, now that you're engaged, here's what happened.
Yeah,
previous.
maybe. But I really enjoyed these. I think Spider-Gwen's a really interesting character. I mean, it's Gwen Stacy in an alternate universe as Spider-Woman, which is really cool. Speaking of Spider-Gwen, the reason I read these was because of this one. She has a really cool Spider-Gwen cosplay that you guys should check out. But I enjoyed these. I enjoyed, I think, volume 0 more than volume 1, although I'm definitely interested in reading more of the series. I think that this explores a number of really interesting sort of moral questions, because one of the sort of elements of the setup is that Spider-Gwen accidentally killed Peter Parker. It was one of those things that like she didn't mean to kill him, she didn't know that it was Peter, but like Peter's one of her best friends. and now the entire city blames her for his death. And so it's, I don't know, it explores a number of really interesting moral issues and has some really cool connections back to the Spider-Verse. So I gave volume 0 5 stars and volume 1 4 stars. Then I got Always and Forever Laura Jean, and this is the final book in the Laura Jean trilogy, starting with To All the Boys I've Loved Before, and I love this series so much. I mean, first of all, just I feels like this series has a really good like aesthetic to it, if that does that make sense? I mean, like all the covers are a pretty good representation of the aesthetic because they're all this like beautiful pastels. And I love Laura Jean as a character, and I feel like we've seen her grow a lot throughout these past 3 books. They have a really good like sense of humor to them, and then they also have some really good, obviously adorable romance, and then some really great family aspects. But at the core of these, I really do feel like, you know, they are sort of marketed as romance books, but at the core I really feel like they're more coming of age, and we saw a lot of that in Laura Jean in this book. It's following her throughout her senior year, so she's just getting ready to go off on her own and figuring out what she wants to do, and how much of what she does should be influenced by like her wanting to stay with her boyfriend, and how much is like her going to college that she wanted to get into.
She does life, and life's hard, and there's choices.
Yeah. And like college is a difficult choice that's complicated for everyone. And it's just really good, and I felt like it was a really great finale to the series, and it just makes me want to go bake, which is why this video is a week late.
That's why you're baking.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
Well, this and Great British Bake Off. That's why this video is a week late, because instead of reading or filming, I've been baking. Anyway, so I gave this 5 stars. Then I read The Love Interest by Cale Dietrich, and this book is so cool. I love it. It's awesome. It is very sort of speculative fiction, sci-fi, but it takes a very common trope, the cheesy love triangle where you have the good boy and the bad boy and the girl who's in the middle trying to decide, and it kind of turns it on its head and shows from the perspective of those love interests, but like what if they're specifically there to be love interests as opposed to just actual normal guys. And then it also makes it gay. It's so good. There were a couple times I was a little worried about it being kind of predictable, but every single time I started to feel like it was getting predictable, it just threw in this twist that completely shook everything up and made it really, really interesting. And the relationship between these two boys is adorable, and the main girl, who's sort of at the pinnacle of the triangle, is awesome and a total badass. And her like group of friends, I feel like a lot of times in books you have the like group of friends who are just kind of set dressing, but her group of friends was actually a really, really good group, and they contributed really interesting things to the story, and they were just wonderful, and I loved them, and I give it 5 stars. And then I read Eliza and Her Monsters by Francesca Zappia. She read it too, and I loved this so much. First of all, the representation of fandom was really cool. And it was from a kind of a different perspective because it's from the point of view of the creator of fandom, and yet she's like a teenager with anxiety and her own sort of things, teenagery things going on, and like she's, you know, dating and trying to graduate high school and dealing with stupid high school pettiness.
And her parents and her
siblings. There were a couple sibling moments in this that I felt like just hit really, really hard, because like most of the time they're doing the regular sort of sibling bickering as siblings do. And then there are a couple moments where like when it really counts, they just pull through, and it's not even like a question that they're there for her. And it just felt so good and like realistic to siblings, at least to my siblings.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's like you guys mock each other, mercilessly, but when it really counts,
especially
like,
with your parents, that's oh my god.
I also felt like the parental portrayal was really good. They're like vaguely supportive, but they don't actually really know the details of what's going on. The family dynamic was really good. I really, really loved the romance aspect of it and how heavily involved fandom was. I mean, there's like fan art, and there's actually like art in this, which is really cool. There's like actually art from the comic in here, and one of the main characters writes fan fiction, and it's just so, like, elements of it are really cool and like great mental illness rep and fandom rep, but then other elements of it are just like fun, fluffy fandom stuff and adorable romance and just so many elements of this worked all perfectly together, and I gave it 5 stars. Do you have any other thoughts you want to add?
I really appreciated the writing, because like the writing was done so well. I think they, like, the way they wrote it was really well done, because it wasn't trying to be dumbed down, but it wasn't trying to be like, here, this is gonna tear you apart. It was very, like, realistic, and, like, I don't know, it got you to those feelings, but it didn't endanger the reader, which I really appreciated.
Yeah, it sort of struck a good balance.
And it was just, I cried.
Tears. So good. 5 stars. I loved it. Then I reread Daughter of Smoke and Bone by Laini Taylor. I read this a few years back, and I've had the other 2 books in the trilogy sitting on my TBR for like 2 or 3 years now, pretty much, I think, since I started BookTube. And I remember I really, really enjoyed this, but I didn't remember very much that happened, so I felt like I needed to reread it so that I could finally get to the other books in the trilogy. And I really, really enjoyed this. It has this really cool, intricate mythology behind it. The sort of supporting cast are awesome. Some really cool badass women. Like, it's a good, like, mix of different kinds of women. Like, there's sort of a nurturing maternal type of woman who, like, she's not actually, like, technically woman because she's not, like, human. There's the main character's best friend who is pretty dang feminine and loves to wear her heels and cute clothes, and she has this whole plotline with this guy that she likes. But she's also one of the most kick-ass characters in the entire book, and she's awesome. And then our main character is just really, really, really cool. And there's this romance that I feel like at times feels maybe a little insta-lovey. It's kind of a complicated thing to explain without spoiling things, but in certain circumstances the insta-love feels a bit much, and in certain circumstances it makes sense that they're kind of insta-lovey. I know that doesn't make any sense if you haven't read it, but it's a really cool mythology, and it's just a cool book and a really beautifully written book. So I did end up giving this one 5 stars. And then I read the sequel, Days of Blood and Starlight. I'm currently in the middle of the 3rd book in the trilogy. This one I liked. I mean, it still had some of the really cool, all the really cool characters, and a lot of the plot developments in this one were fantastic and really, really, really interesting. But it didn't have quite the same vibe that I loved, because it takes place in a different setting, like a very different setting, and it's just the sort of themes of the book are very shifted to a different, I mean, it's a different things are going on, and the overarching plot of the series has dramatically changed what the characters' situations are. I'm trying to be vague so I don't spoil anything, but basically, TLDR, a lot's changed in this book, and I didn't hate it, but I didn't enjoy it as much. The writing obviously was still beautiful, the characters were still great, there was some really, really good relationship development in this one, so I ended up giving it 4 stars. Then I read Lord of Shadows by Cassandra Clare, and I actually have a full, like, half-hour long review of this. The first 10 minutes are spoiler-free, so you can check that out. But basically, I loved this. There was some awesome relationship development. Kit and Ty are my faves. I'm so in love with all the characters in this book, and Cassandra Clare's writing style is awesome. It tackled a bunch of really, really interesting social issues, and I just loved everything about it. You can see more of my in-depth thoughts in my full-length review, but I gave it 5 stars. Then I read Silk Volume 0.
It's the origin story of Silk.
Yeah.
She lives in the SpiderGwen universe?
No, not in the SpiderGwen universe, in the, like, the regular universe,
okay, yeah.
I think.
She lived in a bunker. Now she doesn't.
Yeah. Basically, she got bitten by the same spider that bit Peter Parker on the same day, because, like, she went to his school, but instead of going to become Spider-Man, she was told by this, like, super fancy rich guy that, like, she needed to be locked in a bunker to, like, keep her safe. So she was locked in a bunker for the past 10 years, which results in a number of kind of humorous exchanges involving her making lots of, like, Pokemon references, and just, she's, like, the purest form of 90s kid, and it's hilarious. I really, really, really enjoyed this. I think that it addresses some really interesting sort of, like, social moral questions. There's a lot of really interesting gray morality topics brought up in this, and Cindy Moon as a character is just phenomenal. She's simultaneously really funny at times, but she's also, you know, has her issues. She was locked in a bunker for 10 years, and she's very self-aware of the fact that she has some issues, but also in a lot of ways not. if that, I don't know,
She
if
just
that
breaks
makes
through
sense.
it. She recognizes it, but then she doesn't let it hold her back.
But there are also a lot of elements that, you know, she's still struggling with things, and she's just a really, really interesting character, and I ended up giving this 5 stars. And if you want to see some really badass Silk cosplay, Helen's friend Izzy did a Silk cosplay that you guys should check out.
Zombie Panda cosplay on Instagram and Facebook. She's
Yeah, just
awesome.
go check her out because she's awesome. You can also find links to her on like 90% of Helen's cosplay posts. So those are all the books I read this month. Let me know if you guys read any of these and what you thought in the comments below. Thank you, Helen, for hanging out in the background.
Thanks for having me.
And contributing. I love you guys, and I will see you later. Bye.